Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ms. McGuire online class. And today we're covering tissues. This video will be divided into two parts because the PowerPoint is too long. And I also recorded previously several videos covering the same topic where I discussed in more details structure of tissue, their function, their location, and I will put the link to those videos to the description section. Okay, so tissue, the living fabric, part 1. Let's go ahead and begin. Tissues are groups of cells similar in structure and function. We have 4 major types of tissue in human body, and those types include epithelial tissue, connective, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Now, organs by definition are structures that made of more than one tissue types. On this diagram, you can see how different tissue types are distributed through our body, and the major organs or organs of your body that primarily made of these 4 types of tissue. I'm going to start with nervous tissue. Main function, internal communication, and organs that primarily are made of nervous tissue include brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Muscle tissue contracts to cause movement. Organs include muscles attached to bones made of skeletal muscle tissue, muscles of the heart made of cardiac muscle tissue, muscles of walls of hollow organs such as your stomach, small, large intestine, urinary bladder. That the walls of these organs are made of smooth muscle tissue. Epithelial tissue functions, forms boundaries between different environments, protects, secretes, absorbs, and filters. Example of organs that primarily are made of epithelial tissue include skin surface or epidermis and lining of GI tract organ and other hollow organs. Connective tissue supports, protects, binds other tissues together. Organs include bones, tendons, fat, and we also have other padding tissue that made of connective tissue type. Epithelial tissue or epithelium can be classified into 2 main types by location and function: covering and lining epithelia on external and internal surfaces, and glandular epithelia. Glandular means glands, so secretory tissue in glands. Characteristic of epithelial tissue. Number 1, cells have polarity. Cells have apical or upper free and basal lower attached surfaces. Apical surfaces may bear microvilli for absorption, example, brush borders of intestinal lining, or cilia, example, lining of trachea. Non-cellular basal lamina of glycoprotein and collagen lies adjacent to basal surface. So that means that underneath this basal surface, we have basal lamina. Next, epithelial tissue are composed of closely packed cells. Epithelial tissue forms continuous sheets, and cells are held together by tight junctions and desmosomes. Characteristic number 3. Epithelial tissue is supported by a connective tissue reticular lamina that lie under basal lamina. Epithelial tissue is avascular, no blood vessels, but innervated and has high rate of regeneration. Now, on this diagram, you can see epithelial tissue that is sitting on top of basement membrane. All epithelial tissue resting on a basement membrane, and basement membrane is made of basal lamina and reticular lamina. This is extracellular stuff. Those are not cells, right? This is extracellular collagen and other organic molecules making this lamina. And underneath basement membrane, we have connective tissue. Homeostatic imbalance. Cancerous epithelial cells are not contained by the basement membrane boundaries. They penetrate the boundary and invade underlying tissue, resulting in spread of cancer. This is what we call metastasis, and a tumor that metastasizes is called malignant tumor. When you want to classify epithelial tissue, you need to ask two questions. First question, how many layers? If it's one layer of cells, it is simple epithelium. That means that all cells touch basement membrane. If we have more than one layer, that means we have stratified epithelium. Only most basal layer touches basement membrane. So you can see on the picture above, each cell touching basement membrane, shown here in pink. And on the bottom picture, we have several layers of cells. So it's a stratified epithelium, and only basal cells touching basement membrane. So epithelium can be either simple or stratified. And the second question you ask when you classify epithelium, what is the shape of the cells on the apical surface? Cells can be flat or squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. If we have stratified epithelium, if we have many layers of cells, we will name it according to the apical layer of cells, so cells on the top. So we're going to describe several epithelial tissue, and for each tissue, we will note description or morphology, structure, function, and location. Simple squamous epithelium. So you can see that name is made of two words. Simple means one layer. Squamous means cells are flat. So a single layer of flattened cells with disc-shaped central nuclei and sparse cytoplasm, the simplest of the epithelium. Function allows passage of materials by diffusion and filtration in sites where protection is not important. Secretes lubricating substances in serosa. And I want to remind you that serosa is a membrane that covers ventral body cavities. Now, this is structure and this is function. Remember this principle of complementarity when structure and function are interconnected. So if it's one layer of cells, do you think it's going to be good for protection? Of course not. How much you can protect with one layer of microscopic and very thin cells? So we will find this epithelium where protection is not important. Now, what is this structure is good for? Because it's one layer of cells, it will be easy for substances to cross this layer of cells. That's why the function is diffusion and filtration, and both diffusion and filtration require molecules to move across this epithelium, right? So this is a perfect example of complementarity of structure and function. And if you know function, you can even predict location. Where do I need diffusion? Where do I need filtration? And location would be kidney, glomeruli. This is where filtration of blood happens. Air sacs of lungs. And this is where diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide happens. Also, lining of heart, blood vessels and lymphatic vessels, lining of blood vessels and lining of lymphatic vessels. Lining of ventral body cavities, simple squamous epithelia is part of the serous membrane. Another important location for simple squamous epithelium is endothelium, the lining of lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, and the heart, and mesothelium is a lining of serous membrane in the ventral body cavities. Simple cuboidal epithelium, single layer of cube-like cells with large spherical central nuclei and functions secretion and absorption. You would find this epithelium in the kidney tubules, ducts and secretory portion of small glands, and surface of the ovary. Simple columnar epithelium, single layer of tall cells with round or oval nuclei. Some cells bear cilia. Layer may contain mucus-secreting unicellular glands, goblet cells. Function: absorption, secretion of mucus, enzymes, and other substances. Ciliated type propels mucus or reproductive cells by ciliary action. Location: non-ciliated type lines most of the digestive tract from stomach to anal canal. Actually, in the anal canal, you will find stratified squamous, but from stomach to the end of the large intestine, almost the end of the large intestine, that's the epithelium you will find. Also gallbladder, secretory ducts of some glands. Ciliated simple columnar epithelium lines small bronchi, uterine tubes, and some region of the uterus. Actually, if you just want to remember two major locations for simple columnar epithelium, if it's non-ciliated, it's going to be most of the digestive tract. And if it's ciliated, it's going to be uterine tubes. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Now, pseudo means false. So it's not stratified. It looks like stratified, but every single cell touching basement membrane. And if each cell touches basement membrane, we only have one layer of cells. So it's a single layer of cells of different heights. Some not reach the free surface. Nuclei seen at different levels and may contain mucus-secreting cells and bear cilia. Because those nuclei seen at different layers, we have an impression that we're looking at tissue that has several layers of cells, especially on a real slide. So on a diagram over here, or photomicrograph, you can really see that this is pretty confusing tissue because those are nuclei. And you see at least here 4 nuclei in a row, and it seems like, well, it should be 4 different cells, right? So it cannot be simple. But we cannot see on a real slide, but each cell touching basement membrane, right? And that means this is pseudostratified. Function: secretion, particularly of mucus, propulsion of mucus by ciliary action. Location: non-ciliated type in males, sperm-carrying ducts and ducts of large glands, and ciliated variety lines the trachea, most of the upper respiratory tract. Sometimes the pseudostratified columnar epithelium is also called a respiratory epithelium because most of the upper respiratory tract and trachea, that is a part of a low respiratory tract, are lined by this type of tissue. Stratified cuboidal. Stratified means we have 2 layers of cells, and cells on the top are cube shape. It's quite rare in body, found in some sweat and mammary glands, and typically 2 cell layer thick. Stratified columnar, also rare, limited distribution in body, small amount in pharynx, male urethra, and lining some glandular ducts. Also occurs as transition area between 2 other types of epithelia. Stratified squamous epithelium. A thick membrane composed of several cell layers. Basal cells are cuboidal or columnar and metabolically active. Surface cells are flattened or squamous. In keratinized type, the surface cells are full of keratin, that is a special protein, and cells are dead. Basal cells are active in mitosis and produce the cells of the most superficial layers. Function: protects underlying tissue in areas subject to aberration. And it does make sense. If you have many layers, 100 and 150 layers of cells, it's not going to be good for diffusion, for secretion, for absorption. The best it will suit for protection. Location: non-keratinized type form the moist lining of esophagus, mouth, and vagina, and keratinized variety forms the epidermis of the skin that we call cutaneous membrane or dry membrane. Transitional epithelium is not very common. It's located in urinary system. Transitional resembles both stratified squamous and stratified cuboidal. Basal cells, cuboidal or columnar, and surface cells form a dome-shaped or squamous-like, depending on degree of organ stretch. So you can see this dome-shaped apical surface of transitional epithelium. And if you look at the diagram, you can see several layers, right? So it's actually stratified. And the top layer look like cuboidal over here, right? But in human body, if you have stratified cuboidal, it's only 2 layers thick. So if you have many layers and it look like stratified cuboidal, it's most likely to be transitional epithelium. Function: stretches readily and permits distension of urinary organ by contained urine. Location: lines the ureters, urinary bladder, and part of the urethra. And I know everybody knows where urinary bladder or urethra is, but ureters are those tubes that carry urine from kidneys to urinary bladder, just in case you forgot what ureters are. So all the epithelium that we just discussed is lining epithelium. Now glandular epithelium. Now what is a gland? Gland is one or more cells that makes and secretes a fluid. Glands classified by site of product release, endocrine or exocrine, and relative number of cells forming the gland, unicellular or multicellular gland. Example of unicellular gland is goblet cells. Endocrine glands, those are ductless glands. They secrete hormones that travel through lymph or blood to target organs. Exocrine gland, more numerous than endocrine glands, and they secrete products into ducts. Secretion released onto body surface, like on the surface of your skin, or into your body cavities, for example, in your small intestine. Examples include mucus, sweat, oil, salivary gland, and pancreas too, because pancreas produce digestive enzyme and secrete those enzymes through ducts inside your small intestine. So I will return back to the previous slide, and I want to show you diagram of endocrine gland. So here's our secretory cells, and hormones are secreted to the bloodstream. Exocrine gland, this is our secretory unit shown in purple, and then we have a duct. So product is secreted through the duct, either on the surface of your body, on your skin, for example, your sweat, or inside your hollow organs, such as your small intestine. Unicellular endocrine glands, the only important unicellular gland is the goblet cells that produce mucin that became a mucus. And you would find a mucus in your respiratory tract, and that way you will find your goblet cells, and in your digestive system as well. Multicellular exocrine glands are composed of a duct and secretory unit and classified according to duct type. So duct can be simple or compound, and structure of the secretory unit. Secretory unit can be tubular, alveolar, or tubular-alveolar. So on this diagram, you can see classification of multicellular exocrine glands by a duct structure. It's gonna be either simple or compound. So you see one duct here, one duct, and branching duct, right? Branching ducts. And classification based on a structure of secretory unit. Secretory unit shown in pink. It can be tubular or alveolar. So simple tubular, example, intestinal gland. Simple branch tubular, gastric glands in your stomach. Compound tubular, duodenal gland of small intestine. So you can see all these examples: simple tubular, simple branch tubular, compound tubular, found in your digestive system. Simple alveolar, no important example in the human body, but you can see we have simple branch alveolar, oil gland, compound alveolar, that is mammary gland, and compound tubular alveolar, that is salivary gland, one of the examples. Glands can be classified based on a mode of secretion. Merocrine. Products are released by exocytosis. For example, pancreas, sweat, and salivary glands. Holocrine, when products are secreted by rupture of entire gland. An example would be your oil or sebaceous gland. And apocrine, when the product is released with a portion of the cytoplasm of the apical surface of the cell. Apocrine are overactive merocrine glands that looks as if the apical portion of the cell are rupturing. An example would be your mammary gland, by the way, and apocrine sweat glands. Sweat glands that found only in a particular part of your body, such as your axillary region and where your external genitalia are. And those apocrine sweat glands are not to cool you down like your regular sweat gland, like your merocrine sweat gland, but to produce a body odor. So here's the diagram of merocrine glands. You can see cells over here just releasing product inside the duct through exocytosis. Holocrine, when entire cells are destroyed, right? So cells are destroyed and new cells are synthesized. You can see mitosis over here. And apocrine, when product is released with the portion of the cytoplasm on the apical surface. So example of apocrine glands, again, going to be your apocrine sweat glands and mammary glands. Holocrine glands are your oil glands, and most numerous are merocrine glands, including your salivary glands and your sweat glands. Okay, and this is where I'm gonna stop my recording, because next part of this PowerPoint covers connective tissue, muscle, and nervous tissue, and this will be next video, tissue part 2. So thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.